Okay, so in this video, what we're going to look at is kind of creating that slightly more detailed view of each of our pizzas. So we've already looked at our pizza index, if you like, our slash pizzas page that's got all of our pizzas from the API. But when we actually click on one of them, we want to be able to get this kind of slightly more expanded view. We've got the toppings of the pizza. We've got the pizza again, but we've got, whether it's vegetarian or vegan, it's got the heat and kind of the base. It's got some more information and stuff here as well. So this is what we're going to be working on now. So let's head into our project. And the first thing that we're going to need to do is create that new component, that we're actually going to link to. Okay, so let's, inside our components directory here, I'm just going to make something called pizza, and I think pizza detail is probably a good way of putting this because it's kind of a detail view of a single pizza rather than the index of all of the pizzas. You can call it whatever you want, but I think this makes sense. .js. Cool, we're going to need to make a function with pizza detail. And then we're going to have to export default our pizza detail. Brilliant, should be quite used to that by now. So let's just go ahead and return a h1 of this is the pizza detail page. Now, what we're going to need in here is when we route to it, we're going to need the ID of our pizza. Because if you remember, in our documentation for our API, if we go to get a single pizza, we're going to need to make an API call with the ID of the pizza. Cool, so we'll do this kind of, let's have a look at kind of doing this step by step. So the first thing that we need to do is make it so that when we click on a pizza, we end up actually routing to our pizza detail page. So we've got our component here, but it's not being rendered anywhere. So if we go into our app.js here, what we can do is we can put in quite a clever route. I'm just actually going to get rid of these. If you've not done that already, feel free to. We can actually put in a slightly clever route that's kind of like a dynamic route. So what we'll do is we'll say route and close this. Oh, well, first of all, actually what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to import our pizza detail component. So let's go ahead and import pizza detail from component slash pizza detail. Go ahead and do that because then we've got that. And then down here, we'll say route, when we have a path of slash pizzas, and then it's the ID that we actually want. So how are we going to kind of get hold of that ID? We can't go ahead and put a new route for every single pizza ID because we don't know how many there's going to be. Well, we can do something quite clever. We can say colon, and then I'm going to put here the letters ID. Now you can put whatever you like here, but you need to know what you've put here because we're going to be using it later on. Now it's the ID of the pizza, so it makes sense to put colon ID. And then the element that we want to render is our pizza detail element. So when we go to slash pizzas and then slash an ID of a pizza or slash something, it will then render this pizza detail for us. So let's go ahead, and we've gone to pizzas. Let's now go to pizzas /123, for example. Okay, so now we've got, this is the pizza detail page. Well, let's put something else in here. Let's put ABCD in there. And it's at the pizza detail page again. Well, that's very handy. Because we've said go to pizza /something, we can then just kind of render a pizza detail page. Let's get on with actually making or getting hold of this ID inside this page. So let's head over to our pizza detail. And what we can do is we can use something called useParams. It's a hook called useParams. So up here, I'm just going to import useParams from React router DOM. Okay, it's defined, but it's never used. That's fine. We'll use it in a second. So let's just go ahead and at the top here, just say console.log our use params. And don't forget, we're going to have to call this with the parentheses there. So I'm just calling this now. And if I go to inspect on our pizza detail page, go into our console, we get an object with ID ABCD. Oh, well, that's very handy because now we can grab hold of whatever we put here and use that in our API call. So if I change this back to 123 again and hit enter, we get our ID as 123. Now that ID there is whatever we put in our app.js as here. So if I put George here and save that, just refresh, so that we get George 123. Oh, that's really handy because now when we route to here, we'll have this object in our use params of whatever we've put after the pizzas slash. There is a nice, neat, easy way of just getting that as an ID kind of variable inside this pizza detail function. And we can do something called destructuring. We've done destructuring before, but this is just another way of doing it. So we can say const and then a destructured ID equals use params like that. And that will just kind of take off the ID from use params. Well, it doesn't take it off, it still exists on the use params, but it kind of saves whatever ID is as a variable that we can use later on. Fantastic. So let's go ahead and start actually building our nice kind of pizza detail page. So this is going to be really quite basic, but it just means that we can kind of, throw together something that looks quite nice. So let's make that API call to actually get the data that we're then going to render onto our web page, onto our pizza detail page. So as you know, we're going to have to use a use effect to actually kind of make the call when the page loads, or to call a function that will then make that call. We'll then have to save it all into state, and then we can render that out. We'll just log it to the console for now, but in order to actually get it to show up, we'll then have to put it into state, but we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. Okay, so first of all, let's go ahead and create our async function. And we'll call this, get pizza, I suppose. Oh, I've put the wrong things in here, so we'll call that get pizza, add our parentheses, and then down here. Let's go ahead and just create our use effect right now. Well, we're going to have to import it. So we'll say import use effect from React. Wonderful. And let's put that down here. So we'll say use effect, and then inside the parentheses, an anonymous function, and we will say get pizza and call that. Don't forget, you will need an empty dependency array. Otherwise, you're going to constantly be asking for the pizza. It will loop and loop and loop, and ultimately you'll get booted out of the API. So in here, we're going to, let's just put console.log fetching your pizza. Now let's just go ahead and have a look at our API documentation. And in here, to get a single pizza, well, we're going to need to call HTTPS our URL /API/pizza/ and then just the ID of the pizza. And then hopefully we should get a 200 response and everything will be fine. So let's just save into some variables here, just to make it a little bit easier to kind of read. So let's say here const base URL is that React backend.fly.dev API pizza. You can copy and paste that if you like, or feel free to type it in, just make sure that it's all correct. Now we've already got the ID here. Well, that's pretty handy. So what we can do is, after we've imported Axios from Axios, we can say down here const res or response. Yeah, let's say response. It's nice to type it out, I think. Equals await our Axios dot. Now, can we remember what method we needed? Yeah, we needed a get method. Axios dot get, and we are going for our base URL. So let's use a template literal of our base URL, and then slash the ID of our pizzas. And of course, we've got our ID saved in this variable ID. Just like that. Just a little gotcha, if you like, is if you've got a slash on the end of here, you do not need this slash, because you'd then be putting in like slash slash. So the slash on the end needs to either go here or here, but not both. I quite like to do it this way because this is the base URL, and then I'm kind of constructing this new slash, but it's entirely up to you, to be honest. So let's go ahead and console.log our response. Save this, and we've got an error. It's because it's saying we're trying to get /pizza/ undefined. So let's do a little bit of troubleshooting. So the way that we can kind of see why this is saying undefined here, we've got the ID here, right? That should be showing up. Well, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and console.log our use params. You know, I could go and log out this ID. We already know that that's undefined because we're seeing it come back on that kind of Axios error saying that this ID is undefined. So let's go ahead and console.log our use params. Let's see what on earth is up. So if I save that now, we'll still get the error, but we'd see, okay, it's because I was messing about earlier and I called this George rather than ID. So let's go and head back to our app.js. There we go. That's where the issue is. So let's rename this back to being ID and save that. Now, if I come back here, we'll see that we get our ID of 12345. So let's just refresh this page now. Now we do still get an error, a 500 error, because it's kind of saying it's an Axios error. We can see that we've made the correct kind of URL up because we've now got this 12345 is now being inserted in here. But let's have a quick look at our response. And our response data says cast to object ID failed for value 12345. Now this might be a little bit confusing, but all this is really telling us is that there's nothing in the database with a value of 12345. We actually need to put a proper kind of ID in, pizza ID in here. So let's just test this out now. I'm going to go and open up Postman and then actually just go ahead and make a call to our pizza index. So again, this is just /pizza. Let's send this, and we've got a list of our pizzas. I'm going to go ahead and just copy one of the IDs here and paste this in here. So we're now going /pizzas and then / an ID of a pizza that we know exists because we've just got it from our API call in Postman. Brilliant. So now we've got fetching our pizza. We can see that that ID has shown up on the page. But now in our Axios call, in our data, brilliant, we now have crust, heat rating, image, etc., etc. So what we can do is we can use this data to now kind of render that to our web page or to our pizza detail component. So yeah, let's head into our pizza detail component and let's actually start constructing this better looking nice page. So using Bulma again, just go ahead and follow along and we'll create a really basic page. I am sure that you could do a much better job with the design than I will, but let's just keep it simple for now. So let's go ahead and just make a section with the class name of section. We will then have a kind of a container. So let's say div with class name container. And again, this is all available on the Bulma documentation, but I'm just kind of splitting stuff up so that it looks quite nice. Let's have right at the top of our page in the middle, we'll have a H2 that will have our, inside it, it will have the pizza name. Now we've gone and got our response here, but we now actually need to save that into state. So first what we'll need to do is we'll need to actually put kind of our pizza data into state so that we can then use it to render to our front end. So let's go ahead and we're importing use state from React. So we can just go ahead and put it here, use state. And then down here somewhere, we can say const, and then we're actually destructuring the array that use state returns. So we'll say have a variable of pizza and also a variable which will be a function of set pizza. So set pizza, and then this is equal to use state. Now, what should this be as default? Well, thinking back to our documentation, we will be getting an object with our pizza inside it. So while there is no pizza, it should just be an empty object. Inside our getPizza function here, We can keep the response in the console so that we can refer back to it while we're developing this. But we will set our pizza to our response.data and save that. So now we can go ahead and grab our pizza and then kind of render parts of it to our front end. So what we're going to create is something really simple, and you saw that at the beginning of the video. All of this is in the Bulma documentation, but I'm just going to refer to kind of the one that I made earlier, and we can construct this really simple page together. So let's first of all start with a section. And this will need the class name of section. Inside this, we'll have a div that will be our container. Container, just like that. And then let's make a title with the name of our pizza. So I'll just make this a h2. And in here, we will have our pizza. So whatever's in state, pizza.name. Because if you think back to the documentation, we will have back on this object name. Great. Let's actually just see if that works. So I'm going to save that now, head back over here, and brilliant, we get Hawaiian. We actually get our name detailed just there. Cool. So let's now go ahead and make this styled a little bit nicer, and we'll get on with kind of rendering the rest of the page. So we'll give this a class name of title and has text centered. And save that. Now you can keep going backwards and two if you like, just to make sure that everything's working as it should. And I very much recommend that you do that. So let's make just a line underneath. So we'll use a horizontal rule. And below that, let's have two columns. Let's have one with the pizza and maybe some information underneath it, the image, and then one with kind of more information about the pizza itself. So we'll make our div with our class name of columns. And then we'll make our left-hand column to begin with. So div with a class name of column, and we'll make this half size. So we'll say is dash half. So if we save that now, very little will have changed, but we've got our horizontal rule and we will have a column over here on the left. So inside here, what we can do is we can add a figure to create our image, and we need to give this a class name of image. Inside this, we then need to put an image tag, and we can self-close this. I think it's a little bit neater if we self-close it, my personal preference. And we'll give this a source, or an SRC, not like a pizza sauce, of pizza.image. So now if we save that, let's see what comes up. Brilliant, we get that image actually shown here on the left. Let's, underneath this image, let's also just put whether it's vegan or vegetarian, maybe just with a little tick or a little cross, maybe. So let's go ahead, and underneath this figure, we will have a P, and we will give it a class name of subtitle. And in here, we'll say vegetarian with a capital V, just to make it nice and correct. And then what we can do is we'll use a ternary operator here to say if pizza dot is vegetarian, and actually let's just double check that that is correct, you know, kind of we're using the correct key name there in our console. I'm just going to refresh that and then we'll get our request data. Yeah, it is vegetarian. So I'm just going to Command C that and then Command V there. Yeah, is vegetarian. And if that's true, well, how about we give a string using an emoji of tick. Now on Mac, I've just used Control, Command, and Space to bring up the emoji keyboard. And then we'll add a colon after that. And for this one, if it's false, we will use a cross. So if we save that now, and oh, we've got an error. So module has been failed, unexpected character this. That's a little bit odd. Let's go and have a look at what that might be. Yeah, did you mean, did I mean to use a string? Yes, I did. Okay, so if we save that now, brilliant, we get, no, it is not a vegetarian pizza. Let's just put our cursor in here and I'm going to use Option Shift down to copy that down. And let's just change this to vegan and is vegan as well. Save that. And we've got vegan, no it is not as well. Fantastic work. So let's just go ahead and make this, put the rest of the details down the right hand column. So outside of this column, so you see that it's highlighted our kind of bottom div here. Just after this, I'm going to make another div and we will give this a class name of column and is half again. Bulma will do an amount of kind of working out what you mean, but I'm just going to say that it should be half size. Let's have a H4 with a class name of title, and we'll say that this should have the toppings on it. Now, there's going to be multiple toppings. This is we have an array of toppings. And if I just refresh this, an array. So we're going to need to iterate over this array. Now, how do we do that? We have done this once before. We'll use a map. So under here, now in here, we could run into a little bit of a problem. What if there are no toppings at all? Well, we'll want to kind of render something else if there's no toppings. So what we can do here is we can say pizza.toppings, and then we'll use a ternary. We'll say if there are pizza toppings, well, in that case, we'll do pizza.toppings.map. Then, of course, we're going to write our map function. So topping, and then our function. And then we want to return in this instance, let's say a p tag. And inside here, I'm going to have a little pizza. And then also the actual topping that we're iterating over, so topping. But if there is no pizza toppings, let's add a colon just under here, and then we will instead render a p tag with a sad face and no toppings. So if you save that now, what we will get is actually the list of toppings here. But if we had a pizza that had no toppings, well, we'd just get that sad face with no toppings. Excellent. Let's just put a few more things on this right-hand side. So the first thing that I want to do is make a heat rating. You know, like how hot is our pizza? So let's make just another H4 with the class name of title. And we'll say in here heat rating. So what we can do under here is we can just use some JavaScript to do this. So I'm going to make it a p tag element, and we're going to write some JavaScript, and we'll say if there is a heat rating, so pizza dot heat rating, because that's the key that's on the response, pizza dot heat rating. We're going to use a ternary. And what we want to do here, so this heat rating is going to be a number between 0 and 3. So if we just have a look here, oh, of course, it's saying that we haven't got the key prop there. So in the data, this heat rating is going to be between 0 and 3. So what we really want is we want an array of maybe chilies or something like that we can kind of show the amount of heat rather than just having a number. That might be quite nice. So what we can do here is we can say array with a capital A, uppercase A, and then we need to give it how many elements we want in this array. So we'll say pizza dot heat rating. So we'll have that array of length 1, 2, 3, whatever. And then we'll say dot fill with something. So I'll fill it with a string of the hot chili emoji. And if there is no pizza rating, we'll instead give it a string of not spicy. So if I save that now and go back here, we'll see that we get not spicy. However, if we head over to Postman and we scroll down, or we go and get our pizza index again, and we scroll down to the Diavola, now I can just tell you that this does have a high heat rating, and just copy that ID instead, and Control C that, and then I'm going to go here and paste it into the address bar here and hit return. You'll see that when it does actually load, we get all of the new information, but we now get that 3 chilies because we've created an array of length 3, because that's what's in the heat rating, and then we filled that array with the chili emoji. Nice, easy way of making little ratings bars there. If you get a number, then you can create a rating bar. Of course, this only works with whole numbers. So if you've got like a star rating where you can do 4.5, you might need to think of a different approach. But if it's always whole numbers, you can go ahead and do this. Or you could just round that number to something and do it this way using array.fill. Cool. So I think that's kind of, we could go ahead and we could put a bunch more information here if we wanted to. We could put like a little description and that kind of thing. Feel free to expand upon this as you see fit. But there is just one thing that we need to do first. And in our all pizzas, we've got our list of them, but when we click on them, it doesn't actually go anywhere. It doesn't go to that pizza detail page. So there's a couple of ways that we can do this. I think the easiest way is we could do it in our pizza index here, but I think the easiest way, because it relates to the pizza card itself, is to actually do the kind of the linking inside the pizza card itself. So the way that we do that is we're going to need to import. I'm doing that on the wrong line. So we're going to import link from React Router DOM. And what we want to do is we want to kind of wrap our entire card in this link. So just this stuff here. So let's create our link component here. And I'm just going to go ahead and highlight everything that we want to put in. And a little trick for you here is I want everything in this card to move. So if I just click on the div here, it will show you the corresponding closing div, assuming that it's valid code. It'll show you the correct corresponding div. So what I do is I start then from the closing div back up to wherever I started, because you're more likely to know where you started than where you intend to finish. Kind of just trust me on that one. So I'm highlighting all of this card and I'm going to put it inside the link. So Option Shift and F just to format it nicely. And then we're going to go ahead and link to equals. And then in here, let's make, well, we're going to kind of construct our URL. So it's going to be to /pizzas/ the ID of whatever has been handed down in the props to this card. So it's going to be pizzadata._ID. So in here, we'll say /pizzas, and then $, curly brackets, pizza data, because that's the prop name, and you can see that we're using it here. Pizza data is vegetarian, pizzadata.name, then ._ID. So if we save that now and head back to our app, you'll see that now we get that kind of finger over. So if I click this, you'll see that we're routed to the ID for Meat Feast. And if I go back, we can do the same with Hawaiian. If we go back, do the same with Margarita and all of them. So when you set up the browser router in this way, you make sure that all of your components are inside a browser router component. We can use these links to kind of, instead of having to use A tags and kind of construct that A tag, to be the correct, place that we want to go, we can then have it route to these kind of dynamic paths. And this ID, or whatever we put here, these parameters, will then be handed down into whichever element we ask it to render. Now, don't worry if a lot of that didn't make sense. We will be doing a lot of this kind of dynamic routing as we go on. But this is kind of the correct way to do it in React. You will see people lazily just creating A tags rather than properly using links. But I want you to get into the habit of doing this properly, using the routes with parameters, using the links correctly, and then also using the use params hook to get hold of whatever parameters are then passed into it in that URL bar.